report says that Human Rights Watch says that Myanmar nationals seeking refuge in Thailand are being systematically abused, extorted, and deported by Thai authorities. The report, titled "I'll Never Feel Secure," details how thousands who fled Myanmar's brutal military junta face daily threats, police harassment, and lack of legal protection. Joining us now from Washington is Bill Frelick, Director of the Refugee and Migrant Rights Division at Human Rights Watch, to speak about the report and what needs to change. Very good evening to you, Mr. Frelick. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
So what prompted this latest investigation, and how periodically do you do these probes into the state of human rights in Myanmar, now as we're talking in Thailand?
Well, Myanmar is a closed society, so we don't have much access to the country itself, and much of what we learn about Myanmar does come from refugees. I've done work myself in both Bangladesh and Thailand. I've been up and down both borders, and have interviewed many refugees over the years. So we've been involved in this for quite some time. The 9 established refugee camps on the Thai-Myanmar border have been there since the mid-1980s. There's about 90,000 people living in those camps, but there's a total of 4 million Myanmar nationals living in Thailand, and there's no proper legal regime for recognizing them as refugees or any portion of them as refugees. And so, about half of that number are completely undocumented, and most of those that have a legal status are treated as migrant workers, which is a very precarious status based on sponsorship from an employer. And it doesn't recognize that many, if not most, of these people are fleeing persecution and conflict in Myanmar.
Mm. And are you saying that the only way Myanmar nationals can get legal status as a migrant worker is obviously through Thai government officials' protection measures?
Well, it's oftentimes at a very local level, and it's actually quite corrupt in many cases, because you have people that get sort of informal, what are called, police cards, which are not actually even physical cards. They're just sort of a monthly subscription that is paid through agents that pay off the police to look the other way. And if people don't have those police cards, they're then subject to being arrested, harassed, threatened with deportation, and made to pay bribes. That is particularly the case in Mae Sot and other towns along the border with Myanmar. But it's a corrupt, sort of endemic corruption, and part of the reason for that is that there isn't really a proper way to be recognized as a refugee if you come from Myanmar and you live in Thailand.
I mean, such a graphic description, and really shocking to hear that this has become so endemic that Myanmar nationals are referred to as walking ATMs.
Yeah, I mean that they are a source of income for poorly paid policemen in Thailand, and they're subjected to abuses on many different levels. And those actually who get migrant worker status, oftentimes that's it's steeped in corruption as well, because they need to be sponsored by employers that are Thai nationals, and there are agents that are involved in creating fraudulent employers that are in name only, and there are payoffs that happen there as well. Or if they're actual employers, they have people over a barrel and can exploit them because their migrant worker status depends on the employer being satisfied with whatever arrangement they've made with the person who has that very difficult and precarious legal status, which isn't based in any way on the need for international protection, which is what any sort of a proper refugee regime would entail.
I'd imagine how traumatizing this kind of life must be for them, because those who are obviously refugees, or some of them perhaps even genuine asylum seekers, but they're seeking security and a livelihood. So having to pay where you don't have, I can't imagine that they would have run with money to Thailand.
Well, and speaking of trauma, we interviewed people. There's one that I remember that was a 33-year-old who had spent 2 years in prison in Myanmar. He had been involved in the protests after the February 2021 coup, and he wasn't released until the beginning of this year, 2025. And upon his release, the police picked him up as soon as he set foot out of the jail, and took him to the police station and began interrogating him all over again. They released him briefly, and he fled immediately to Thailand. But then in Thailand, there's no place to go to get refugee status. There's the national screening mechanism that exists on paper explicitly excludes nationals of Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. So there's no legal way to be recognized as a refugee. The word refugee doesn't exist in Thai law, at most under this national screening mechanism. For other nationalities, it's called a protected person. But that again, this is a country that is not a party to the Refugee Convention of 1951 and hasn't bound itself to the basic principles of refugee protection that would apply to everyone regardless of your national origin.
Just listening to you, I'm reading your report where one woman says despite paying a bribe for herself and her 12-year-old niece, she ended up getting arrested and being detained for 9 days, and after which she was sent back to Myanmar, deported back to Myanmar. How many of these cases have you documented?
Yeah, there's no guarantee. Even if you supposedly have a police card or you have the pink card for the migrant workers, these are not secure documents, and at any point in time, they can be pulled. They don't really have any standing. The police cards, especially, are just an informal, corrupt setup, and they can be revoked, for any reason at all. So this is very, it's widespread. It's common. There are about 1.7 million undocumented Myanmar nationals in Thailand. So, finding these cases is not difficult at all. There are many, many people that are in this situation.
And the Thai authorities, are they taking any responsibility, or are they at least concerned about the trend of police extorting, abusing these Myanmar nationals, given the fact that they are not a signatory to the convention relating to the status of refugees?
Thailand has a very, very long history, going back to the Vietnam War era and the Cambodian genocide and all the years. Myanmar for decades has been producing refugees, and Thailand has, provided, land for refugee camps along various borders throughout its history, but it's never wanted to bind itself to international refugee standards. It's always wanted to come up with ad hoc approaches, defining refugees as people who are fleeing, active shooting, for example, which is certainly you want to protect people that are in that situation, but that doesn't limit who should be defined as a refugee. And so it also wants to put the international community in the position where this is not a burden that is borne solely on Thai shoulders, but is a shared responsibility. And one of the problems that we're seeing right now is that the international community, and particularly the United States, which has a history of support for refugees going back to the Vietnam War era, and now we're documenting cases where people are dying because the aid that had been provided until now from the United States is being cut off. So there was a stop work order that went into effect with cutoff of USAID funding, and there's a person that we found that died of renal failure, a 30-year-old woman. We spoke to her husband, and she would still be alive if it hadn't been the cutoff of U.S. humanitarian assistance to Thailand. So this is part of the context that we're looking at when we're looking at pushbacks that are happening at the Myanmar border, and we're looking at Thailand that doesn't want to be stuck, so to speak, with the burden of caring for millions of people, which is an international responsibility. It shouldn't be borne by one country alone because of the happenstance geographically of its location. And so there's a certain level of sympathy for Thailand being located where it is and having had many refugee influxes over the years, and yet so we definitely want to hold Thailand responsible, and the corruption is something that needs very definitely to be addressed, and the lack of a legal regime. If you don't have the capacity to do individual asylum determinations, then provide a temporary protection regime that would provide blanket protection. But then the international community has to step up. I regret, I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C. I'm very sorry that the U.S. has pulled back in this way, in this very harmful way. But the rest of the world has to step forward as well, because the Myanmar refugees, not just in Thailand, but in Bangladesh as well, are highly vulnerable under these circumstances and need tremendous support.
It's a conversation we definitely ought to visit at another time to hear more of your views on what can be done to alleviate or at least improve the situation. Bill Frelick, Director of the Refugee and Migrant Rights Division at Human Rights Watch, thank you very much speaking to us about the exploitation Myanmar nationals face in Thailand.